What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Jevin's World, where you get insight into the world that is my mind. And today we are back with vlog number 4. And in this vlog, we'll be talking about the October 12th session of Digital Media Literacy with Dr. P. Also talked about the birth of the internet and what it truly is. I'm sure most people would tell you that the internet is something like Google or YouTube or Amazon or Bing, when in actuality the internet is something a little bit more physical. I'm sure most people don't know that under these oceans that there are long cables and long wires that stretch from here all the way to the other side of the world that connect us. If you wanted to ever truly touch the internet, this is the closest that you would get. The internet is a really big and vast network that connects every and any computer on the planet. This allows people to share information and connect all over the world. So if I'm here in DC, the internet allows me to send a video to someone all the way in Turkey or Germany. Now the things that I mentioned earlier, like Google or YouTube, those fall under something that is called the web or the World Wide Web. That is a subset of what the internet actually is. Now, the World Wide Web, or the web, is more of a subcategory or a subset of the internet, which brings us things like Google and YouTube, and it brings them to us through a thing called a web browser. So to put it simply, while the internet is something like Wi-Fi or a LAN cable or an Ethernet cable, the World Wide Web is something like Safari or Firefox, Google Chrome, or Internet Explorer. Before this session, I always thought of the internet and the web as really one and the same, when in actuality, one can't really exist without the other. The World Wide Web can't really be a thing without the internet, whereas the internet can essentially be a thing without the World Wide Web. This is also the reason why when you tell someone how old the internet actually is, they might be a bit surprised. See, the internet has been around far longer than the World Wide Web has. The history of the internet starts all the way in the 1960s, whereas the first web browser was actually created in the 1990s, almost a 30-year difference between their creation. The purpose of the web browser was to make the internet more accessible and usable for your average Joe. Before that, it was only used by doctors, scientists, and nerds due to the complexity of what the internet was. Now, the creation of the web browser is what subsequently led to the browser wars, which is what the documentary talks about. The documentary titled Download, The True Story of the Internet, is a 43-minute film that talks about the creation, competition, downfall, and consequence of some of the oldest web browsers and the people behind them. Now, there are two main points from the film that I want to talk about. The first one being the big mogul, the big monopoly man in the film, Bill Gates, and second, the lack of representation in the film. Now, me personally, I have a few mixed feelings about Bill Gates. Sometimes I think of him as someone that was like a big man, a big tyrant that had a lot of money. On the other hand, whenever I see him, he always seems so nice and peaceful and somewhat of a caring family man, if that makes sense. Film showed him as a very serious and very aggressive person who was willing to do anything and everything to undercut and undermine any person that would step to him in any way. From watching the film, I kind of got the vibe that for him, this was more about the ego or his ego and less about the money. Because before this, he already had a lot of money, but I feel like he just didn't want to be outdone by a bunch of amateurs from Illinois. And as someone who was from Illinois, I just want to say that I'm quite proud of what we did in this film. I also feel like this mentality kind of trickled down to people under him and his company, because even they're willing to put in the work, even if they weren't getting paid more, just to prove that they were better than their competitor. Now, to most people, this whole browser war thing might not seem like a big deal, but for him, he was willing to take illegal actions to make sure that he came out on top after all of what happened. And the fact that he was willing to go this far is what eventually led to the whole lawsuit and him having to step down from his company. So honestly, he did all that work for all those years for nothing. Now on to the second point that I wanted to talk about, which was representation in the documentary. Throughout the entire thing, you don't really see a black person. Honestly, I don't even think there was one on screen. And to be honest, I'm not really surprised given the topic for the documentary. As I was watching the film, I did notice that there weren't any minorities, much as black people, throughout the entire thing. Again though, I'm not really surprised, even though black people did have a hand in some of what was going on in this documentary, but I won't go into too much detail about that. Instead, I want to talk about the reason why there weren't any black people, or at least my theory as to why there weren't any black people in this film whatsoever. I'm sure if you ask a lot of people what the biggest creation of human evolution there has ever been, Most will probably say the internet or the World Wide Web. And to attach any kind of black person, any kind of black name to this, honestly would appear detrimental to our development, if that makes sense. Overall, I honestly enjoyed this film. I thought it was insightful and informative, and I'm excited to see what's next in my digital media literacy class. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.